What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today we're going to be talking about proper aiming technique in Advanced Warfare. There's tons of videos out there telling you how to improve your aim by simply buying control freaks or changing your sensitivity to what fits you, but these videos rarely discuss actual aiming techniques and how to properly aim in-game. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Let's get into it. Alright guys, so there's a few different aiming techniques that I've been hearing about over the years, and a lot of people are constantly talking about when they're talking about improving their aim. And we're going to be covering a couple of those different aiming techniques in this video. So the first one, I'm going to start with the overly simple version of it. Should you aim down sight or should you not aim down sight? And keep in mind throughout this video, we aren't talking about shotguns or sniper rifles, we're talking about SMGs, assault rifles, and LMGs. So just wanted to clear that up. But the simple question, should you aim down sight or should you not aim down sight? Simple answer to this is you should always try to aim down sight in a gunfight. I don't care what range you're at, you should always at least try to get aim down sight. And the explanation for this is actually quite simple and probably obvious to most of you. When you're hip firing, even when you're really close to your enemy, it's always going to be at least a little bit of a gamble whether or not your shots are going to hit. And obviously as you get further and further away from your target, the odds aren't really going to be in your favor. So you should always at least try to aim down sight, because aiming down sight, you're guaranteed that bullet is going to go exactly where your aim down sight when you fire that shot. And I'm not talking about lag either. There is lag, I understand that, but we're talking aside from lag. When you're aim down sight, when you pull the trigger, that's where your bullet's going to go. So taking this one step further, now that you know that you should at least try to get aim down sight, there's still the question, should you aim down sight first and then fire your gun? Or should you be firing your gun while you're hip firing and then aim down sight as you're firing your gun? This is a question that gets asked a lot. I get asked this quite often, and a lot of people don't really understand when to do which one of these. Because there is no simple answer to this one. There's no black and white on this one. It's very situation dependent, and it's also dependent on the gun and the attachments that you're using on your gun. So let's start with the first situation. That's being right up close. Let's just say you have an SMG, you're using the ASM-1, you're within shotgun range of your enemy, and you guys both run into each other at the same time. You both kind of take each other by surprise. So up until this point, it's a fair gunfight. What should you do? Should you hip fire and then get aim down sight? Or should you wait and aim down sight completely and then fire? In this situation, it's fairly obvious. You have an SMG, you are at close range, so the chances of you hitting your shot while you're hip firing are actually pretty high. They're pretty decent, especially with an SMG because you do have that tighter hip fire spread typically. So you should be hip firing while aiming down sight. Now you might be wondering, what's the point in even trying to aim down sight in this situation? Well, you're still going to be improving your odds as you get aim down sight. Maybe you get really unlucky and your hipfire shots just for some reason are all drawing a circle around your enemy and they're not hitting. Well, at least now you are getting aim down sight. Once you do get aim down sight, assuming you survive for this long, you are now completely 100% on target. So yes, you should be hip firing first in this situation because you do have a great chance of hitting your target, and a lot of times you'll even hit your target before you get fully aimed down sight, but I still recommend aiming down sight. So let's have a look at the other extreme. What if you're at a really long range to your target? Once again, you still kind of come across each other at the exact same time, but you're basically across the map from them. Should you be hip firing as you aim down sight, or should you aim down sight first and then fire? Well, once again, this one is probably obvious to most of you. You should aim down sight first, get on target, then fire your gun. The reason for this is pretty obvious. You're not going to want to hip fire across the map. Your chances of hitting your target with a hip fire across the map, I don't care if you're using laser sight with an SMG and you have the tightest possible hip fire spread that you can get on an SMG with laser sight, your chances are still quite slim of hitting your target. Now, why do we want to take that little bit of extra time to get aim down sight before we start firing when you could technically start firing as you aim down sight? Well, this is where you have to deal with recoil, and also you have to deal with the muzzle flash of your gun a lot of the times. So basically, if you're firing while aiming down sight, you're not going to necessarily, like once you get aim down sight, you might be a little bit disoriented because your gun is kicking around a little bit. You might have completely lost sight of your enemy in the muzzle flash of your gun. So now you have to make adjustments to try and get on target and find out where your enemy actually is, while also dealing and compensating for the recoil. So instead, if you aim down sight first without firing at this long range, you can make sure that your first shot hits. And this is key. If you make sure your first shot hits, the next 3 or 4 shots that you need are going to come a whole lot easier than if you were to miss your first shot and have to make an adjustment as you're shooting your gun and dealing with recoil. So at long range, always aim down sight first and don't even attempt to hip fire. It's useless in this situation. It's only going to put you at a disadvantage. So those are the two extremes. What about sort of that medium range? Well, this is where that line starts to get a little bit blurred, and it also depends a lot more on the gun that you're using as well as the attachments you're using. So let's just say you're at a mid to close range, so you're not quite in shotgun range, but you're still within like the SMG's most effective range. You probably still want to be hip firing as you aim down sight with an SMG, because you're getting bullets down range quickly. You still have a decent chance, even if it's like a 50-50 chance of your bullets hitting. That's still a decent enough chance as you get aimed down sight, and you should be able to stay on target just fine as you get aimed down sight. But with an LMG, for instance, especially like one with a really slow fire rate, you probably want to make sure you're aimed down sight before you start spraying with your hip fire. And the reason for this is your chances of hitting with the hip fire on that are very, very slim at that point, because the hip fire spread is typically bigger on the LMGs. Plus, when you're dealing with a slower fire rate, you're not putting very many bullets down range very quickly, so your odds of hitting bullets in time are very, very slim. You're much better off to get fully aimed down sight and then make sure your first shot hits and then kind of hope for the best, but you're probably outmatched in this situation anyways. As for an assault rifle in this exact same situation, it could go either way. I typically prefer, especially because I like to run quick draw grip, this is where attachments come in. I like to run a quick draw grip, so I typically prefer to get aim down sight first and then fire my shot with an assault rifle, even at this sort of close to mid range. But you guys may not use the quick draw grip, and without it, I would probably recommend hip firing as you aim down sight, because it takes a little bit longer to aim down sight. So really just use common sense with this. Think about it in game when you're actually doing it. Should I have aimed down sight in that situation? Obviously, you're not going to have time in real time to think about this too much until you really get used to it. But after that gunfight happens, win or lose, just think about, well, would I have been better off hip firing before aiming down sight or aiming down sight first? And you should be able to come up with the answer fairly easily in hindsight. So that explanation for that one technique actually took quite a bit longer than I expected, but I did want to be quite thorough with that so you guys get a really good understanding of that particular technique of aiming down sight first or shooting first and then aiming down sight. So I am going to be dividing this into a couple different parts. In the next episode, I will be talking about another technique that is often, there's a lot of confusion surrounding this technique, and that's essentially, should you get on target and then fire your gun? Or should you be firing your gun and then getting on target, assuming you're off target in the first place? So I will be discussing this one in great detail in part 2. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.